Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Imagine your neighbor, the HOA president, demands you remove your security camera. You say no. So she sends fines, you ignore them, then she sends her lawyers. But what she didn't know is that I'm not even in her HOA. And I was about to teach her a lesson in a very, very public way. So I need to tell you all about the last few months of my life because it has been a wild ride and I still can't quite believe how it ended. I'll try to keep this organized because there are a lot of moving parts, but stick with me because the payoff is genuinely worth it. I work from home as an IT project manager. That means my whole job is documentation, timelines, communication trails, and making sure nobody can come back later and claim something that was never agreed to. I think about process the way other people think about breathing. It's just how my brain works. That detail matters a lot to this story. I live in a house that's kind of an oddity in the neighborhood. It's a brick farmhouse, probably 80 years old, with two massive oak trees out front that have been standing longer than the house itself. The yard isn't perfectly manicured. It's got raised garden beds, a wildflower strip along the fence line, and the kind of lawn that looks cared for but not obsessed over. I like it. It feels like a real place where someone actually lives. About 15 years before I bought the property, the original owner sold off a large chunk of surrounding land to a developer. That developer built an entire subdivision around it. Dozens of identical houses, all of them the same shade of beige vinyl siding, little saplings staked into the ground with wire supports, matching mailboxes, the whole picture. When the development went up, the residents formed a homeowners association and set up all the usual rules and restrictions that come with that kind of setup. But here's the thing that's important to understand. My parcel was specifically excluded from that sale. The farmhouse and its half-acre lot were never incorporated into the development's legal footprint. When I bought the house 5 years ago, my attorney walked me through the deed, pointed to the plat map, and confirmed that I was not, and had never been, part of the association. I thought it was a fun quirk of the property and didn't think much more about it after closing day. My house sits at the edge of the development. Directly across the street from me is one of the standard subdivision homes. For the first few years, the neighbor across from me was a quiet man who waved when he saw me and generally minded his own business. That changed when he moved away and a woman in her mid-50s moved in. She had a very precise, organized energy about her. The kind of person who parks her car at a deliberate angle in the driveway and coordinates her welcome mat with her front door. When she moved in, she came over and introduced herself, and she was perfectly pleasant at the time. What I didn't know yet was that she had run for president of the Homeowners Association and won on a platform of cleaning up the neighborhood and making sure standards were being maintained. I found that out later. At the time, she was just the new neighbor. The trouble started with package theft. I'd been seeing posts on the local community app for months. People in the area reporting packages disappearing from porches. A few shared footage of blurry figures walking up and grabbing boxes off stoops mid-afternoon. I work from home and order things regularly, and I hadn't been hit yet, but I figured it was only a matter of time. So I bought a video doorbell. A Ring model, solid quality, nothing flashy. I mounted it myself, neatly and level, on the brick beside my front door. The angle was designed to cover my porch and the walkway from the sidewalk to my door. It wasn't aimed into anyone else's yard or windows. It was watching my property. I felt good about it. Practical purchase, clean installation, problem handled. 3 days later, I found a laminated note tucked into the crack of my front door. That detail still gets me. Laminated. Someone printed this note and then ran it through a laminator before putting it on my door. The note was written as a friendly reminder from something called the Aesthetics Committee, which I later learned was a real subcommittee of the association. It stated that all exterior modifications required prior approval from the board, and that unauthorized changes were subject to review. There was also a sentence about how security cameras pointed toward neighbors' homes raised privacy concerns the community took seriously. No signature, just a note from the committee. My first reaction was mild amusement because I was already fairly confident this didn't apply to me. But I've made enough mistakes in professional settings by acting on assumptions rather than evidence, so I didn't just ignore it. I found a generic contact email at the bottom of the note and sent a polite message to it that same evening. I kept it short. I explained that I'd received the note regarding the doorbell I installed and that, before I could respond to it properly, I needed to confirm which governing documents applied to my specific property address. I asked for a copy of the relevant covenants or bylaws, and specifically the section on exterior modifications and security equipment. The reply came back the next morning, not from the generic address I had written to, but from a personal email that clearly identified the sender as the association's president, my neighbor from across the street. The tone had shifted completely. She told me that all homes in the development were subject to the same rules, that my camera appeared to be pointed toward her property and specifically toward her living room window, and that I had 14 days to remove it before receiving a formal violation notice with associated fines. She did not acknowledge my request for documentation anywhere in the message. I had two options at that point. I could fire off something sharp, or I could stay methodical and keep building the paper trail I knew I was going to need eventually. I went with option 2. I sent one more reply. I thanked her for responding, said that I still needed documentation showing my property was bound by the association's rules before I could take any action, and noted that my understanding was that it was not subject to those rules. Short, professional, polite. Then I waited. She didn't reply. What she did instead, about a week and a half later, was send a physical violation notice through the mail. It cited a specific article and section of the bylaws, stated that I was in violation due to an unapproved exterior modification, and included a fine of $100. Here's the thing about that fine. It didn't scare me. What it did was shift the situation from a neighbor being pushy to an organization making a formal legal claim against my property. Those are two very different categories, and the second one requires a different kind of response. I sent a brief acknowledgement to the email thread saying I was reviewing the notice and would respond in due course. I didn't pay anything. I didn't touch the camera. Then I waited, because I had a sense that things were going to get more interesting before they got better. About 4 days after the violation notice arrived, I was at my desk when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the Ring app. I looked at the preview and recognized the figure walking up my front path. It was the president herself coming over in person. I watched her ring the bell on the app screen before I went to answer. She was not in friendly neighbor mode. The way she was standing told me she had thought about this visit in advance. When I opened the door, she got into it quickly. She said the fine was now past due, that she wasn't going to keep going back and forth on the situation, and that the camera was a direct violation of her privacy because she could see it from inside her own living room. She said if I did not take it down within 48 hours, she would authorize a contractor to remove it from my house and bill me for the cost, on top of additional fines. I waited until she finished. Then I told her as calmly as I could that all I had ever asked for was some documentation showing her organization had authority over my property, and I asked again if she could provide that. She couldn't. She repeated the contractor threat. I told her, still calm, that if anyone came onto my property and tampered with something I owned, I would treat it as trespassing and property damage and respond accordingly. She told me I was being unreasonable. I thanked her for stopping by. She left. The whole visit was recorded in high definition from the moment she stepped onto my walkway. I clipped the footage immediately and saved it in 3 separate places. About a week after that visit, a letter arrived from a law firm. I want to pause here and say something about how this kind of thing works, because I think it's worth understanding if you've never dealt with it before. HOAs have a specific tool in their belt when residents don't comply. They retain outside legal counsel, have that counsel send an official-looking letter full of statutory references and formal demands, and count on the fact that most people, when they see a law firm's return address on an envelope, get scared enough to just do what they're told. It's a pressure tactic more than anything else. Most of the time, it works. This particular letter was written in the kind of legal language specifically designed to make a normal person feel like they've already lost before they've even responded. It stated that I had outstanding fines now totaling $500, that I was in violation of recorded covenants affecting my property, and that if I failed to remove the camera and pay the balance, the association reserved the right to file a lien against my home to recover costs. A lien on my home. I read that line a couple of times. I'm going to be honest with you. Even knowing I was almost certainly right about not being in the association, reading the words lien on your home made my stomach drop a little. That's exactly what that language is designed to do. It's meant to make you feel like the easiest path is compliance. I did not comply. What I did was take a half day off work, drive to the county records office, and get some certified copies. The staff there were helpful. I explained what I needed. They pulled the relevant documents and made certified copies while I waited. The first was my property deed, foundational, if not exciting. It described my parcel by its legal boundaries, and there was no reference anywhere to a homeowners association, no recorded covenants, no declaration of restrictions tying my land to the development next door. The second document was where things got genuinely satisfying. It was the original subdivision plat map from when the development was created. This was a large printed sheet showing the entire layout of the neighborhood, every lot numbered and labeled, all the streets, the lot lines, everything. And right there, clearly marked with its own separate parcel number and annotated as a pre-existing lot, was my farmhouse. Sitting outside the boundary line, the development's legal perimeter was drawn right around my property, not including it, explicitly excluding it. I stood at the records counter looking at that map and felt a specific kind of calm settle over me. Not triumph exactly, more like the feeling of being correct at exactly the right moment. I paid for certified copies of both documents and drove home. Now I had everything I needed. I had been patient, I had been polite, I had documented every step, and now it was time to actually use what I had built. The first thing I did was draft a response to the law firm. I spent a couple of hours getting it right. I'm not an attorney, but I know how to write a clear, logical argument supported by evidence. I laid out the timeline in order. I stated that their client had made formal legal claims against my property, asserting authority through recorded covenants. I stated that no such covenants appeared anywhere in my chain of title. I attached certified copies of both the deed and the plat map. I noted that despite multiple written requests over the course of weeks, neither the president nor the association had ever produced any documentation showing my property was subject to their rules. Then I addressed the visit. I noted that the association's president had come to my home and made verbal threats, including a specific threat to send contractors onto my property without my consent, and that this entire interaction had been captured on video. I stated that any further contact involving threats, fines, lien filings, or other claims against my property would be met with a countersuit for harassment and damages. I made clear I considered the matter fully closed and expected all fines to be voided and all threats withdrawn in writing. At the end, I attached a still frame from the ring footage showing the president standing at my front door. Not to be dramatic about it, just so they understood I wasn't speculating about having a recording. That letter went out via certified mail that same afternoon. But there was a second thing I needed to do, and this one took more thought because I wanted to get the tone exactly right. Here's what had been sitting with me since the law firm letter arrived. The president hadn't just pushed me around with a passive-aggressive note and some bluster. She had retained an actual law firm, using association dues that real homeowners had paid out of their own pockets, to pursue legal action against someone who had never been in the association and had no obligation to it whatsoever. She had done all of this without performing the most basic due diligence that anyone in her position should have done before issuing a single fine, let alone bringing in lawyers. The homeowners in that development were funding this. They deserved to know. I spent one evening writing a letter addressed to the residents of the development. The tone I was aiming for was important. I didn't want it to read as an attack. I didn't want it to sound like a grievance or a personal vendetta. I wanted it to read as exactly what it was supposed to be. A calm, neighborly heads up from someone outside the community who had been caught in the middle of something that affected all of them financially. I started by introducing myself as the person who lived in the older brick farmhouse at the edge of the neighborhood. I said I was writing because there was a situation I thought the residents should be aware of, since it had to do with how their association dues had been spent. I explained briefly and factually that over the past several weeks, the association had been attempting to force me to remove a security camera from my own property, including hiring a law firm to send me a formal demand letter threatening a lien on my home. I said I understood the association may have been acting in good faith, but that there was a factual problem with the whole situation. Then I included a copy of the plat map, not a certified copy, just a regular photocopy, but clear enough for anyone to read. I drew a circle around my property in pen. Anyone who looked at it for 30 seconds could see exactly what I was describing. I noted that a review of the publicly available county records would have shown, before any fines were issued or legal counsel was retained, that my property was never incorporated into the development. I said I was sharing this only because I thought the dues-paying members of the community deserved to know how their resources were being managed. That was it. No name-calling, no emotional language, no dramatic flourishes, just facts, a document, and a very pointed observation delivered in the most neighborly tone I could manage. I got the mailing addresses for every home in the development from county property records, which are entirely public. I printed the letters and the map copies, stuffed the envelopes, put stamps on all of them, and mailed them in a single trip. Then I went home, made dinner, and waited. I did not wait long. The first sign that something was happening came from a neighbor I'd been on friendly terms with for years, someone who'd lived in the development long before the new president showed up. She sent me a text that same day the letters would have arrived. She said she'd gotten mine, that she was floored by what it described, and that the development's online group was absolutely overwhelmed with people talking about it. I wasn't in that group, so everything I got was secondhand, but over the next day or two I pieced together the picture from a few different sources. A lot of residents were already frustrated with the new president for other reasons, things like petty enforcement of minor violations and an aggressive tone that had rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Those were individual grievances, though. They were personal. What my letter described was different. It was about money, their money, paid in good faith as dues, spent by a person in a position of trust to pursue legal action against someone who owed the organization absolutely nothing, without anyone bothering to check the county records first. That, apparently, was the thing that broke open. By the following morning, there was an email in my inbox from the law firm. The tone was completely different from anything they had sent me before. No jargon, no threats. Just a short message from one of the partners confirming that upon review of the documentation I had provided, they had advised their client to withdraw all outstanding claims. The fines were voided. The threat of a lien was withdrawn. They acknowledged in writing that my property was not subject to the association's recorded covenants, and they apologized for any inconvenience the matter had caused. I read that email 3 times. Then I printed it out and added it to the folder with the rest of the documentation. I didn't really need a physical copy for any practical reason. It just felt right, after everything that had gone into building that folder, to have this particular piece of paper in it. A few days after that, an actual letter arrived from the association's board of directors. Not from the president, from the board itself. It was a formal written apology confirming that all fines and actions related to my property had been dismissed and that no further claims would be made. It stated that the board was conducting an internal review of procedures to prevent a similar situation from occurring. 4 board members had signed it. The president had not signed it. Not long after that, a neighbor came by in person. She'd been on the board before the new president came in and had stepped back when the new administration took over. She knocked on my door, and when I answered, she looked genuinely embarrassed on behalf of the whole thing. She told me an emergency board meeting had been called, that a petition was already circulating to remove the president from her position, and that the vote, when it happened, wasn't expected to be close. She thanked me for handling everything the way I had, and said that keeping it factual and documented had made it very hard for anyone to frame it as a personal conflict between neighbors. I told her I was glad it was over and that I had no hard feelings toward the community itself. I said they'd done nothing wrong and it wasn't their fault the person they'd elected had acted the way she had. She said she appreciated hearing that, and she'd pass it along. The weeks that followed were genuinely quiet. No notes in my door, no violation notices in the mail, no correspondence from law firms, just normal working mornings, the sound of rain on the oak tree leaves, motion alerts when a delivery truck pulled up. About 3 weeks after the apology letter arrived, the same neighbor confirmed what I'd been hearing through various secondhand conversations. The president had been voted out of her position. The margin hadn't been close. From what I could see from my front porch, the house directly across the street had gone quiet in a way it hadn't been since she moved in. I'll be honest, I don't spend much time thinking about what she's going through over there. She made a series of choices, those choices had consequences, and the people she was supposed to be serving were the ones who held her accountable. That's exactly how it should work. One evening, a few weeks after all of this settled, I was sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee just watching the light change. It had rained earlier in the day and everything smelled clean, like wet leaves and fresh soil. My phone buzzed with a ring notification. I opened the app and looked at the live view. A neighbor from a few houses down the street was walking her dog along the sidewalk in front of my property. She glanced up, spotted the camera, and gave it a little wave. Then she kept walking. I sat there on the porch for a while after that, just thinking about how strange the whole thing had been from beginning to end. Someone had decided that my presence in this little corner of the neighborhood was a problem that needed to be managed and corrected. She pushed, escalated, brought in lawyers, made threats, sent certified mail, and at no point during any of it did she stop to do the one thing that would have told her immediately that none of it had any foundation. She assumed she had the power. She never checked whether it was real. And when someone builds that kind of certainty without ever verifying the ground under their feet, there's really only one direction it can go. My camera is still on the wall. Clean little device, does its job without bothering anyone. It actually caught a would-be package thief on camera about 2 months back, and I was able to share the footage with a couple of neighbors who had been losing deliveries. Small thing, but it felt like the right ending. The front porch still has the 2 big oaks. The garden still looks like someone actually lives there and uses it rather than maintaining it for appearances. My house is still the oldest thing on this block by about 60 years, and I still like that about it. She wanted the camera gone because she hated the idea of being watched. What she didn't account for was that the camera had already been watching from the moment she walked up my front path with her grievances and her threats and her untested assumptions about how much authority she actually had. Everything she said and did on that visit was already recorded before she finished her first sentence. In the end, it wasn't just the camera that was her undoing, it was her own certainty that she was right, and the fact that she never once stopped to check. The privacy around here is fantastic now. Peaceful and quiet and entirely mine. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Does anybody else hate starting stories? Seriously, I'm as adept at starting a story as I am titling or succinctly telling them. Anyway, I work in the deli for Arizona's hometown Grover. Sorry for the punctuation issues, new phone. We just had a rough inspection, causing our deli manager, let's call her Shirley, to have a wild hair up her butt, giving everyone in the deli a hard time every step of the way. There's so many steps it's getting annoying. It's insanely busy because of a unique combination of the TPC Waste Management Open Golf thing and our app offering free pizzas to about 5% of the app users. I make the pizza, and up until recently I had a tendency to burn a lot of them for 2 reasons. 1, it's extremely busy, and therefore easy to lose track, and our timer for the oven being a little turny manual alarm that isn't as loud as you would think. It also is near impossible to turn the dial for it to 8 minutes 45 seconds. I had to start it at 9 minutes and wait for 15 seconds. Anyway, I make 3 pizzas, put them in the oven, and say, "Hey Siri, set a timer for 8 minutes 45 seconds. I don't hear confirmation on the phone in my pocket, so I pull out my phone to confirm, and lo and behold, I have to manually set the timer on my phone. That very picosecond, Shirley Temple saunters in and says, "Look at your phone on your break. Company policy!" I swear she curtsied after this. This woman is off her rocker, screaming at me in a way I'd have to change the font size for to demonstrate, then right after hits the emergency brakes and turns on her sweet voice. Katie Kaboom 2.0. The word break echoed through my soul like Marcia Brady getting hit by a football. I'm thinking, break? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that A, I never take breaks, and B, the policy is that on a 4-hour shift or longer, I get 20 uninterrupted minutes for break. Enter MC. I say, "Hey, thanks for reminding me. I never take my breaks. I've been here 5 hours, so I better skedaddle." Company policy. "Oh, and by the way, you have a pizza or 3 ready in OH, exaggeratedly looks at phone, about 6 minutes 45 seconds. See you in 20. I could only imagine what her face looked like, but I truly didn't care. I enjoyed my Ultra Zero Peachy Keen Monster and Peachy Peace while playing Monopoly Go. Now and forever, I'm going to make this break thing a habit. I could see a flurry of deli arms flying around from my table by the soda machine. I'd get the occasional glare from a customer in the line that is now backed up to almost where I am. All I can do is shrug my shoulders as if to say company policy. The next one is an entitled parent story. So, I have a beautiful border collie named Venus. Venus is a service dog and have pretty much saved my life. I love her more than I can say. So, to begin the story, let me tell a thing a lot of people do not know about service dogs. They play. It seems silly, but a lot of people seem to think service dogs are perfect robots who are only there to serve and have no dog instincts. That is not true. or at least it should not be. A service dog need to play, and also to know when they are on duty and when they are just relaxing, and how to recognize when their relaxing time needs to be interrupted. Venus loves to play. When she is off duty, she loves to be surrounded by people and play with everyone. She also has dog friends, and this is an important point because her playing buddies are huge. 2 of them are Goldens and the other one is a Labrador, and since she is the smaller of the group, she is used to play rough, and every time a smaller dog approaches her, I make sure to be watching closely so she does not hurt the smaller dog while playing. So, today it was my BFS birthday, and we decided to go to the park with some friends of him to have a picnic, and since Venus was invited, literally he gave her a little card, we decided to go to a dog area where there are big spaces with some agility equipments that's surrounded by fences so the dogs can be without a collar. There are 4 of those spaces in the park, all side by side, and they are pretty much all the same except that there are some ones whose agility gear is smaller so smaller dogs can do the tricks. It's a lovely place. So we get into one of the dog spaces and start our picnic. Since Venus knew everyone there and I was comfortable, I decided to use her normal collar instead of the cape she uses when she is on duty, so she knows she is there to play. We go there, play with her, let her try the agility things, and at one point I was sitting on the fairest end of the park just chatting while another group play. Fetch with Venus, when out of nowhere I freeze completely when I start hearing a dog whining, look to the other side to the camp to see Venus just rolling and stepping at the smallest Dachshund pup I've ever seen in my life. My first instinct was to start running and yell, "What kind of idiot brought a pup here?" And immediately starting to yell for Venus to stop. It took a few seconds for her to stop rolling the pup around, just the time I arrived there, put her back on the leash and started haranguing her. For which I feel bad, she wasn't to blame for this mess. She thought it was playtime and there was a dog, so she thought it was okay to play with the dog. Then I look at the pup and see it stumbling its way for a ducking middle-aged bald man who was looking at it and laughing for duck's sake. I look at him extremely confused. He looks me back and says, "That's fine, they are just playing." Seemingly oblivious to the fact that Venus was playing. His poor little puppy was having the most distressing experience ever. At the time, I could not believe he was serious, so I glazed at the other spaces and said, "Sir, there are other empty spaces there." The moron looks at me and says, "And what are you suggesting?" before grabbing his pup and taking him to walk around the camp. I was so confused for a moment I just let him go and turned to the people who were there and asked if they told him to join us or something, for which they responded the guy just entered our spot without even glancing at us and set his pup to play with Venus while he keeps scrolling on his cell. Just a point, it was not a matter of we thinking we own the place, people share those spots very frequently, but there is literally a sign warning owners that if there is another dog in the recent, you should first speak to the owners and ask if it is okay to let their dogs play. It is both basic decency and common sense in order to avoid accidents. And that dude just ignored both the signs and the empty lots for who knows which reason QND laughed when his pup got in danger. At the point, I was not only livid, but highly stressed. In my city, a dog that kills another person's dog is euthanized. That moron not only put his poor little pup in danger, but he put Venus as well, and everything I could think as I saw that scene is that that little innocent pup would die and then I would lose the most precious friend I have in life. I was so mad that when the guy approached us yet again to urge his pup to play with Venus, who by now had already understood playtime was over and was just sitting quietly and ignoring the pup, I just gave a step and said what he just did was extremely irresponsible both with his dog and with mine. Of course, a douche who was stupid enough to throw his pup to a big unknown dog would throw the most stupid tantrum ever over it. He started to say that me and my generation is why he can't have a peaceful life, and all he was trying to do was to have a nice day, but I was ruining it. Then he said that I was crazy and he knew dogs are pure and the only way a dog could be evil is if the owner was evil like me. Then he said he had did it before several times and never a dog attacked his pup. For that I answered that all he had to do is to pick a day to gamble with the wrong dog and his pup would become dog food. And since he was an absolute moron, I knew he would be the first one to want the dog who did it killed. So, yeah, I did not care about his peace of mind or if I ruined his day if you just came here to put dogs in danger and make a problem. At this point he just walks towards me with a finger raised saying I was evil, again. And if I knew the things he wanted to do to me, I would get out of his face, which I didn't, and I am not saying that as prudent because he could be armed, but Dude put dogs in danger, and the person he was threatening was a black belt with 20 friends already forming a circle and answering his threats with promises of what would happen to him if he raised a hand. At the end, the dude just went away yelling curses and slurs and stomping like a toddler with his poor puppy in his hands. We spent a couple more hours there, but then we decided to leave earlier than planned, to make sure then guy would not come back with a gun or something like that. As we left, we E&EV spoke with a nice couple with another boarder who asked if their dog could play with Venus, and In was broken-hearted that we had to say no because we were already leaving. So, that was what happened. I know maybe I should not have engaged, but what is done is done. I am really sad for my boyfriend and the other people since it killed the nice picnic mood, and also sad that I had to reprimand Venus for something that was not her fault in her playing day. I also feel bad for that pup. It was so young I am not even sure it has the age to get the necessary vaccines. It's really sad that it will have to spend its life with such an irresponsible trash can of a person as its owner. Anyway, thank you for watching.